Oh, all right. The music has stopped and the bells are chiming. So that means we are ready to get started. Good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon's webinar on mastering remote work. I was sort of sticking away from saying the whole title because it's strategies for success and productivity, which I feel puts a lot of pressure on Taylor and Heather. So I'm seeing everybody joining, so welcome. For those of you who I don't know, I am Dean Lucy Gilson. I am the Dean of the Paul College of Business, but I think I'm part of today's session because prior to becoming a Dean, I have been doing research in the area of virtual work for probably the last 20 years. And in fact, when I started this work back in 2002, a lot of people said to me, that's cute. That's so niche. No one will really ever care about this. Why are you not studying a more important topic? Given where we are in this day and age, I beg to differ. But the other piece I will add is one of the reasons that I got interested in this topic is I sort of feel like I've lived in a virtual world my entire life. I grew up outside of the US, which is maybe obvious to some of you, but I was growing up in countries that were a long way away from the rest of my family, different time zones. And so we had to use phone, Skype, email, text, fax, whatever means we could to communicate and to make plans to see each other and to stay close and sort of build strong relationships. So to me, virtual work was almost normal by the time I actually got into researching and trying to understand sort of the mechanisms of what works and what doesn't. But our panelists today are going to tell you a lot more about their experiences, what they do, how they run their teams. So let me do a little bit of housekeeping here at 12:02. So we're going to talk for about 30, 40 minutes, the three of us. But I would say if at any time you have a question, you can type that into the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. At the end, we will leave about 15, 20 minutes when we will answer questions live. But you don't have to hold your questions to the end. If you think of something, type it in and we'll get to as many as we can. And then often some of them we may even follow up afterwards if you're asking a very specific question. So let me get started. Taylor and Heather, do you want to unmute and cameras on? Look, here we go. Welcome. All right, so let me start by welcoming Taylor DeChico, who actually I'm gonna say anymore. I'm gonna say, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background, your connection to UNH, and why we invited you to join us here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Lucy, and hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. So Taylor DeChico, I graduated from the business school in 2011. While I was at UNH, I was a member of the student committee on popular entertainment. So that was kind of my footsteps into event planning, which then dovetailed into a career in marketing now. So I'm the senior vice president of marketing at Resman Property Management Software. It is a company that is based out of Dallas, Texas. So obviously I work remote. I have spent, almost a 15-year career in marketing. Half of that has been in executive leadership roles. I spent a portion of that running marketing and business development over in Sydney, Australia. So certainly remote from our main office that was in Boston. We'll talk about that today. And I have been working remotely and managing remote teams for the last 5 years or so now. So happy to be back in New Hampshire and working for companies all over the world.
Welcome, Taylor. Heather, why don't we have you introduce yourself?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here with the UNH community today. I graduated from UNH in 2005, majored in political science. I minored in English. After that, I did a short stint at the New Hampshire State House, working as a legislative aide. And then I returned to UNH for what was then, I believe, the second year of the full-time MBA program, and I completed that in 2007. And currently, I am head of stewardship at Impacts Asset Management. Impacts is a specialist asset manager investing in the opportunities arising from the transition to a more sustainable global economy. So at Impacts, I am responsible for implementing our company engagement activities and strategies. So really working to encourage companies to strengthen their sustainability disclosures and management processes. I am based in Impacts' Portsmouth, New Hampshire office, but we are a global firm, and so remote working is very relevant. So in addition to our New York and New Hampshire offices, we also have offices and colleagues based in Japan, Hong Kong, Ireland, and our global headquarters is based in London. So again, the topic is particularly relevant to our current working environment, and thrilled to be part of the conversation today.
Thank you both. Well, let's start on that question. So you've both alluded to it slightly, but let's go in a little bit more depth on what is your work arrangement and what is your organization's work arrangement. So how does that, how do those things work together? So obviously, Taylor, you're based out of Texas, but tell us a little bit more about your work arrangement and then the company itself.
Sure. So the company is headquartered out of Dallas, Texas. I'm located in New Hampshire. And I'm obviously fully remote. I do travel to the office once a month, about-ish or so. And then for the folks that are near the office, so the company itself is probably 50-50 hybrid. So 50% of the people live within driving distance of the Dallas headquarters, and then 50% of the company is remote. The marketing team that I run, we are 90%. So my team that reports into me is based from New Hampshire to Maine to remote locations in Texas, Arizona, California, and then I believe we have someone in the Atlanta area. So distributed team as well. The decision that our business made in the post-COVID environment was it's a hybrid working engagement if you are located within driving distance. So for the folks that are in the Dallas Metroplex, it being in the office anywhere from 2 to 3 days a week, and that varies by department. So it's up to that manager to set the days that they want their team in the office to really control that schedule. But if you are beyond a certain driving distance, that we don't force people back into the office. I think the business has been very understanding of we all have, lives. I think people got accustomed to, being there and more present for their families. So that flexibility is something that we really value. We want to make sure that people are showing up with their whole selves. So that's the current working arrangement and kind of where I'm at.
Let me just probe a little bit more on that, one day, a couple of days a month that you are in the office. Is that everybody on your team, or is that company-wide, everybody's in for that 1 or 2 days a month?
So no, it's not even just my team, it's just me. So I fly, and then other members of the executive team will all fly and try to be there the same week together so we can have a monthly in-person exec meeting. And then once a quarter, I will bring my team in where we'll do like a quarterly on-site, have bigger times, plan some social things in the evening. Our industry is very event driven. So the marketing team does get together outside of the office and we'll meet at different parts of the country for different events, which is quite fun. So it just depends on the time of year and, when we're getting together more often.
Okay, thank you. Heather, what about you? Tell us a bit about you said you're in Portsmouth and Impacts. You're based in Portsmouth, but what is the work arrangement that you have and that the company has more broadly?
Sure. So, pre-COVID, I would say, like a lot of firms in the financial services industry and more broadly, we were fully in person, and with relatively few exceptions. We had a few sales folks who are based, throughout the U.S. and they were traveling frequently, so they were certainly remote. But by and large, the team was fully present in the office. I wouldn't say that it was necessarily that it was frowned upon, but remote work was just not actively encouraged. And I think, frankly, when I first joined the firm, which was about 15 years ago, we weren't really set up, didn't have the resources in place to manage a fully remote workforce. So naturally, that all had to change with COVID. And so, like everyone else, we did quickly pivot and did have the resources in place to go fully remote. We adopted, new ways of working and communicating as a global team. And so coming out of the pandemic and over the last probably I would say 2 years at this point, we've adopted a hybrid work arrangement. So the current firm-wide policy is generally 3 days in the office and 2 days remote. But there's certainly a lot of flexibility within the system, and certain individual circumstances are certainly considered. I think, Taylor was mentioning, where employees are based and how far their commute is. That's certainly something that the firm takes into account and works with individuals to sort of manage that. But generally, most folks are in the office that 3 days a week, remote 2 days, and it's not dictated which days you're in the office. It's really something that's worked out at the team level. So I'm generally in the office Tuesday through Thursday, depending on what is happening in a given week, what other meetings are happening, what other departments might be in, and who I might need to be in person with. But I also try to overlap with my direct team here in Portsmouth. We are all local. So, it's easier for us to coordinate schedules, but I also work with our colleagues in London quite closely. And obviously that means that we're always remote, even if they're in the office, we're on different continents. So, from that perspective, I guess we're always in a little bit of a virtual or a remote environment.
And so there's no days that everybody is in. So it's a team-based decision.
Generally, unless there's something going on more at the firm level that would necessitate, people coming in. If they've planned a social event, for example, probably most people will be in, but it's really left up to the teams and the managers to determine what's best for their own individual team members.
Okay. It's funny thinking back to you saying, we didn't have the technology. We didn't have the language, right? So when I, first started work in the 1990s at M&M Mars, it was an open plan office, right? Because that was, all the big thing in the 90s. Everybody was open plan. It was very new wave. And because I had to do a lot of detailed work, I was allowed to work from home 1 day or 2 days a week and, bring my 34-pound portable computer on the London Tube, which those of you who travel there, you go down up a lot of escalators that often don't work, and carry this monstrosity to then pull out and have my little screen so that I could work from home. Well, we didn't call it remote work back in the day. So let's think about that, the work arrangement piece of it. What would you say, and we don't have to keep going back and forth, and which anybody can jump in. What would you say is working really well about this sort of hybrid virtual work environment that you're working in now, and why is it working well? And then what are some of the things that we still haven't quite figured out that are ongoing? Anybody want to jump in?
Sure, I can jump in, and then Taylor can add. I think something that was helpful in terms of tools was having Microsoft Teams. That was a new addition that really we implemented at the firm right around COVID. I think we transitioned from a different platform, and that was really like a crucial tool for us communicating within teams and within the whole firm. We have multiple channels. We have a water cooler channel where the whole firm is, but then we have certain different departments. We have different groups. We have different focus areas. So there's really something for everyone. And we really do encourage regular chats through these multiple channels. I think at the team level, we have weekly check-ins, do video calls. And I think that's just a chance to catch up on what, everyone's working on, what the week's priorities are, where a colleague might need additional support from team members. And that's also where we figure out, which days may we come in person, what tasks do we have that would be better suited to conducting in person versus individually at home. And I think also making sure that we're not just focused on work topics when we're communicating, really checking in on how everyone's doing personally. What have they been up to? What vacations have they done? How was their weekend? I mean, I think it just helps foster that personal relationship and really allows people, to better relate to one another. I think that's really important too, again, where I have colleagues that I've never met in person. And so we have to build that sort of collaborative relationship online. And so I think that connection is really important. And I think it also helps in terms of our professional success, which I'm sure you've done research, Lucy, and can speak to that, in more detail, but it's just so important, that communication piece and having the tools and the resources in place to make that effective.
No, the communication, I'll dive into that a little bit more in a minute. But Taylor, I know you guys do a lot of interesting things.
Yeah, we do. So my team, again, we're coast to coast. We have 2 bi-weekly weekly stand-ups a week. And, again, to Heather's point, a lot of the first few minutes is just banter, right? We're all remote. So how was your weekend? What's going on? The first meeting per week is always an around the horn, just giving that extra visibility into what people are working on, right? Like you would usually stop by someone's desk and ask, or you hear the chatter, but that doesn't happen in a remote world. And then Thursday is typically topic-driven discussions. If we have a big event coming on or a campaign, or if there's something larger, we'll use that time to discuss. And, again, it's my call of what we do. And sometimes we just play trivia if the team needs it, right? Because you need to bring and create that energy and that atmosphere that you would typically have in an office that you don't. As a company, and this started in COVID when everyone was remote prior to moving back, we actually do an all company stand up every single Monday. So that's something where, and again, at multiple software companies that I worked at, I think transparency is always the best policy. It's how you get everybody on the bus rowing, driving in the same direction. And we run through where we're at on sales metrics, where we're at on pipeline. We recognize, birthdays and anniversaries, and, we recognize team members that are being called out by our customers and also internal ones. So I think that helps give the company-wide, team members visibility into what's going on, since everybody is not in the office. And we do it on a day. Monday is typically not an in-office day for our hybrid employees. So then that makes it equitable from everybody's remote on Mondays, right? So everybody's in the same seat. It's not like you're running a meeting in an office where half the company is in the office and half the company is remote. You can't hear, so you run into a lot of technical issues. So by doing our all company meetings on days when everyone's remote, makes everybody have the same experience, which I think is really important when it comes to managing remote teams and that remote experience as well. We also have, outside meetings. We also have I'll call it a vibrant text chat that's just on like phones. Then we also have one that's on Teams, and you need to have lots of gifts, lots of sharing on there, lots of, chatter, work related. And then, for example, every Friday, I'll typically throw in a Spotify playlist that I would usually play in an office, but, I give the opportunity for people to listen in at home and grind out on a Friday. So.
I was gonna say, it's only Wednesday, so we're not getting the playlist today.
Yeah.
I had to see what day of the week it was, which is
Yeah.
an issue with hybrid work. But let's come back to that. So I'm hearing text, I'm hearing Teams. What other tools do you use, and how do you decide which tool to use when, and how to mix and match?
So I would say it's predominantly Teams for, so we're on Microsoft for all of our office productivity. So that's where we have, chats, we have group chats, one-on-one chats. We do all of our video calls through Teams. The text thread on the phones is more, I'd say that one's more just team banter when we're traveling. We'll share pictures of our dogs, like our kids, it's kind of more non-work related. But again, that's something that's my decision that I created as a manager for my team, to provide that extra piece of contact that you would typically get in an office that you don't get in a remote setting. So it's giving everybody that glimpse into, I don't know, we're all people at the end of the day. We're all, and that is something that's often missed when you do work remotely, is that you're not, seeing the emotions or getting that extra glimpse into someone's life. So, and I think you can relate to people better that way. You can have harder conversations or better conversations if you know a little bit more about that person and you establish that trust with team members.
Tell us more about the whole water cooler thing as well. Sorry, Heather, but I want to know more about that company water cooler.
So I think very similar to Taylor in that we largely rely on Microsoft Teams. We have a water cooler channel where our communications team will kind of post things that are happening around the firm. It might be highlighting a specific employee. Something they've done is, a piece on like, what don't you know about your employer? What's their hidden talent? And so that's a great way to, get to know people, again, fostering that camaraderie, that connection. We do, a mix of video calls and non-video calls. I think it depends on the nature of the meeting. I think videos are encouraged, but there's also a recognition of, if maybe you're just listening into a meeting and you're not playing an active role, maybe you don't need to have your camera on. But I think people are comfortable, doing what works best for them in that particular moment. So there's a lot of flexibility in the system. We also have a personal text chain, my team, where we do kind of tell jokes and just, that banter back and forth, which is nice. We do a little bit of that on Teams as well, but it's kind of nice to have that additional channel outside of the more structured work environment, and just, I guess, speaks to the fact that we are, we do have friendships and things of that nature. So
yeah. One thing
Go
I
ahead.
do want to add, Lucy, that I didn't mention when we prepped for this, but I just remembered. So Resman is a business unit within a larger company, and our larger company, so there's 1,100 employees globally. We have an intranet as well, which is a online, I'll call it, community where there's, all of your policies, there's a directory for all employees. But what our parent company also does is they have a whole page for recipes, for dog photos. There's all kinds of topics that connect people beyond even the company that we work in. So again, that's in the age of remote work. It's like, how could we better connect everybody across? And an intranet is another place beyond just productivity tools like Teams that provide another connection piece to employees, wherever they may be. So.
No,
yeah, that's a good point.
yeah.
We have one of those as well, and right now it's very busy we're running a January pledge, and it's an environmental challenge across the firm, and so really encouraging people to reduce their carbon footprint in their personal lives. And so you earn points for doing certain things. We're divided into teams, across the globe, and there's a lot of banter. There's a lot of jockeying for getting points and just fostering, that sense of community. And so that's something that's on the intranet, and people are super active in it right now. So again, connecting you with folks that you probably wouldn't normally run into in your day-to-day activities, which is really interesting and helpful.
And adding a little bit of healthy competition there, I think,
Yeah.
keeps everybody engaged as well.
Very motivating.
Yeah. The other piece I love that you're both talking about is bringing your non-work self into the virtual world. So the early research on virtual teams showed that virtual teams are very effective for simple additive tasks, but then as work got more complex, team performance went down. And, for a number of years, we didn't understand why that was. And what we then learned through subsequent research was the importance of familiarity in knowing something about you. So you have a dog, or you have a new child, or you run marathons, which has nothing to do with the work that we are engaged in. But what we found was that when I know something about you, I'm more likely to ask for help or show my vulnerability, right? And so help giving and help seeking, is positively affected by non-work familiarity, which, I think for a long time we thought of virtual teams really as just being this efficiency zone. So let's talk a little bit about that. One of the things that we have to do in a virtual world is build up trust. And we've kind of learned since children how to do that in person. How have you built trust with your team, with team members that, you may have never met and you work with for a significant amount of time before you meet them in person, or if you ever meet them in person? How do you build trust? How do you build that team spirit?
Sure. I can go first, and then Heather, I'll pass it to you. So, I think, we build trust in people that I've hired remotely and don't meet them for a year sometimes. But again, I think it's the transparency and the coaching that you provide as a manager on, here's where the company's going, here's how your goals contribute to that. And then making sure that you are communicating, business goals into a way that's going to immediately affect them to make that employee be the best that they can be at their role. Trust is earned over time. I'm never going to demand trust from someone. That's my responsibility as a manager to go earn that from anyone that I hire. And I think it comes back to being a servant leader and helping that person, and then communicating with them as much as possible. So it's, if they have something that is, they're working on and they're stuck, again, it's, in an office, you would be like, great, let's go into this conference room and let's go whiteboard that out. You can still do that virtually, even though you're not in the same room. You throw a 2-hour-long Teams meeting on there, and you throw up a Miro or a virtual whiteboard, and you dig in, right? And that's how I think you establish credibility as the manager or the leader, and then also as the team player that's going to help them. So I think it's just caring at the end of the day, honestly, I think, right? And it's just treating people as you would in an office, the same way that you would. There are tools out there that are going to empower and enable you to do that. So that's at least how I've done it. Again, I think if you're the type of leader that's willing to do that, then that trust is going to come back from your employees really quickly. And same thing with your peers too, right? Like it's just the frequency of conversations that you have with your peers that extends beyond just the normal business day to day, right? It's asking or supporting them whenever they need it. And it's, it's the random phone call after a meeting of, hey, we just had a meeting. I still have a question. I'm going to call that person just to clarify or do something. And then you build that up over time. But it comes with just really effective communication.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with everything that Taylor said. I think transparency is really key. So we also have a monthly town hall, which is the whole firm, and it's an opportunity for everyone to hear from senior leadership about where the business is going, what's the current focus, where are their challenges, and it's a very honest and open conversation. Employees have a chance to ask questions in real time that the CEO and other C-suite executives will respond to. I think we also, one of the key parts of that meeting is introducing all of our new joiners. So, I mean, we are a 300-person firm. We're growing pretty quickly, but every town hall we do introduce new people who have joined, and a key part of that is people sharing a fun fact about themselves, which always elicits a bunch of laughs. Again, forges connections and things of that nature. But then taking it back to the team level, I think it goes back to that, that weekly check-in where we're, just what are you working on this week? How can I help? What challenges are you facing? And something that we started doing, during COVID, but has continued as we've got this hybrid work arrangement, is more like working sessions on teams. So rather than me doing my individual work or Taylor doing her individual work and then coming together to talk about it, it's like, let's tackle this problem together and let's talk about it as if we were in a conference room or you were sitting next to me in the office. And that's been really effective. I think it's been the work product that comes out of that is much stronger. It's like that 1 + 1 = 3, rather than me trying to figure it out on my own and not have anyone to bounce ideas off of. It's really been kind of a game changer for some of the projects that we're working on. And again, it fosters that sense of trust. It fosters that sense of communication. You're listening to other people's ideas, taking them into consideration, responding in real time. And I think the other thing too is, trying to reach out to people after a meeting and to recognize, that was a really great job that you did during that meeting. You made some really key points. You really presented your work well, or had a great idea. I think that little reinforcement goes a long way. And sometimes I think you can lose that in the remote environment if you're not actively thinking about that. So that's something that I try to do even in real time as we're going through meetings, like, hey, you just raised a really good point. Just giving that little bit sense of feedback, and also encouraging people. Like if I know that somebody has something to say and maybe they're a little bit shy about raising their hand, like I might nudge them and say, hey, you should, here's your chance to jump in and share your idea. So I think it's just little things like that. Again, as Taylor said, kind of showing that you care and that there is that trust and that, that collaboration as being a member of the team and part of the larger firm.
But let's also be careful that we are not painting this completely rosy picture, because it can be very challenging working as part of a virtual team and being a hybrid or fully remote. So let's spend a couple of minutes, see some of the things that you've struggled with or things that haven't gone as you would have hoped.
I think earlier for me,
go ahead, Heather.
No, I was just going to say, I think for me, one of the challenges at the outset was that what was reaching out to people over Teams or calling them. I think in the office, it was, even though you're still interrupting somebody, it was much easier to walk up to somebody's desk and say, hey, how are you doing? In the virtual environment, it did feel like a massive interruption to someone if I just cold called them, right? So I kind of had to get over that hurdle and push myself, because it is important for the reasons I was just mentioning. So I think that was a challenge that personally I had to overcome. And I think also encouraging people to reach out if they needed to talk about something. And, at the end of the day, if you're not available at a given time, you'll call somebody back, right? So it's not, I think it got built up to being this huge interruption to other people's workflow, when really in the office, it can be much more distracting because you have people coming over to you constantly. So I think that's one thing that jumps to mind for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an adjustment. The FOMO was an adjustment for me at first. That was first when I, moved from a head office in Boston. It was a software company called Acquia. I was relocated to Sydney, Australia. other side of the world, right? Coming from the corporate office where I was always connected to everything. So I had to let go of, what am I missing out on? You know, I was always so worried about that, which can be hard. And even in the office now. So, you know, like Heather mentioned, it's that call after a meeting finishes to get that like post-meeting banter, just as key, you know, so you don't have that sense of like, oh, what have I missed? Because sometimes those conversations in an office after the meeting ends or where the gold is, right? You're debriefing on whatever it was. So making sure that you find ways to cold call someone. The other thing that you develop over time is in the virtual world, and whether that's over Teams messages or chat or emails, you lose context and you lose emotion. And, I'm someone that I love to be on video so I can read people and see their reactions. I can hear the inflections in their voice to understand where their intent or where their response is coming from. And oftentimes you lose that when it's just a Teams message or it's just an email. So what earlier on, when I first adjusted to it, I would get something and I would immediately assume the worst. And maybe that's me being a millennial and always anxious. I don't know, but why is this always wrong? But now, as you've gotten used to it, it's like not always assuming negative intent, always assuming positive intent, and first searching for information, I think is something that, you have to get over as you adjust to it. Because sometimes you get something that feels jarring because you can't hear how that person is asking. So I think always assuming positive intent, seeking what they want before making a judgment call and reacting is something I would really encourage.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Sorry, Lucy, I was just going to say, I think an important piece of context for my sort of position is that we had just gone through a merger right before COVID, really. So we were kind of getting to know each other, and COVID forced us into this remote work where I was on a level playing field with my colleagues in London because we were all in the same boat. We were all remote. And then as we started going back to the office, there was that FOMO feeling of what's going on in London that I don't know about because I'm not there. Mm-hmm. And so being very intentional in reaching out to people there and just, catching up, like what's going on in the office, what are you guys talking about? If there was something that came across that I didn't understand or didn't have context, again, being intentional and reaching out. But I think, Taylor, your point is so spot on that don't think negative intent right out of the gate. Really try to frame it as a positive and do some investigative work to kind of figure out what's going on. Because I think there was definitely a lot of that sort of in our office as we got to know each other. But, I don't like to say that that there was a silver lining, but there was, because it really allowed us to get to know our colleagues globally, again, on that level playing field, and then take those lessons learned and apply them to, what is now kind of our normal working environment.
Yeah, when you're talking about, sort of that FOMO piece, and then the office, and then the virtual, and sometimes they're different cultures, right? There's the culture of the people. I mean, I'm guessing the people within the Dallas, they've developed their routines, their habits, their language, because they're there. And then your team that is, fully virtual has its culture, and then they're that more, hybrid ones. But a key piece then of this is, how do we use that in-person office time effectively? Because, one of the big complaints post-COVID, right, was I go back into my office and all I do is sit on virtual calls all day. I could stay home in my pajamas, or why am I spending this much on petrol, or, whatever it's going to be, or commute time. How do we use our time, if we're going to be hybrid in this, how do we use that office time, face-to-face time, in a really meaningful way?
For my team and for my experience, where when I'm coming to the office, quarterly, I'll bring my team in. It's largely, we have team meetings, and then we focus and really want to do something social and together, like outside of the office, again, to build that bridge of trust, to build that, hey, what are we doing outside the office? Can we go tour a venue? Can we go to a paint night? Can we do things that just bring togetherness of the team? That's both, we'll do work meetings, but then we'll also make time to do social things, because we don't get to have that, where you can't just go grab, a beer after work or a coffee during the day. So I think that face-to-face time should really be spent on fostering relationships above all else, when you spend so much time apart. So really taking advantage of that. And then when it's just me coming to the office, like again, that responsibility is on me to maximize that time with my boss, with my peers, with other members of the leadership team, and also heads of other departments where, you know, sometimes in organizations, departments may have different priorities. So if there's a rub or something I need to go diffuse, that's the time when I go and I'll take that person and say, hey, like, let's go get that cup of coffee, because you remove someone from their virtual environment and even outside a work setting, you know, all barriers just naturally come down, so you can have a lot more effective conversations that way.
And I'm going to, I guess, challenge Heather a little bit with this question, right? Following up on what you just said, it's one thing if you're going in once a quarter, once a month, but if you're in 3 days a week, I think from a leadership perspective, I'm not going to be happy if those 3 days are all social. Just throwing it out there. So how do you use those days? Not that I mean, I am completely, again, you know, that in favor of the social side, but, you know, how are you managing the 3 day, 2 day, you know, how you use that time differently?
Yeah, I think that's an important question. And I think it goes back to kind of the weekly check-in and what are the tasks for for the week. Because as you said, what we don't want to do is come into the office and then be sitting on virtual meetings all day. And I do think we were probably guilty of that a little bit when we first came back, trying to figure out how do we do this now? What is the right way? So I think, you know, we look at what projects or what tasks would really benefit from that in-person touch or communication, and set aside a time for those tasks versus things that maybe are more individual, that don't necessarily require the input of others, and prioritizing those tasks for the days that you are remote. It doesn't always work out perfectly that way. There's always curveballs, but I think that is how we've tried to manage time. I mean, we'll even be on Teams. If we're all remote on Monday, we'll be like, you know what, tomorrow I really want to talk about this when we're all in the office. And so we make it a point, you know, to have that conversation and to get the feedback of the team members. We also have a monthly lunch with our team that is sort of both the social, but we also pick a topic that we're going to kind of dive in on and discuss. And it's nice to, you know, we're all remote, but we're in the office, but it's nice to be outside of the office setting, still having that work conversation, but having that little bit of social aspect as well, that banter at the beginning. I think that has been a nice addition, but it is really delineating those tasks that really do benefit from the brainstorming, the collaboration. Do we need members from other departments? You know, what days are they in the office, and things like that. So there's a lot of coordination. I mean, you have to be selective in how you're managing this and kind of go with the flow as things change. But I think we've come a long way since we first came back, when we were kind of guilty again of all sitting on the phone. We'd be looking at each other in the office like, wait, we're on the same call, but we're sitting next to each other. This is very silly. We need to figure this out.
I'm hearing a lot of planning. From a leadership perspective, do you feel you spend a lot more time planning now that you're working virtually and hybrid?
Yeah, I think one of the things you have to own is you have to be very intentional with planning, with maximizing time together, thinking about, you know, to Heather made a great point of like, hey, is this meeting better suited in person? So we'll do a lot of our quarterly planning when we are all in person in the office. Like, what are the ways that we can maximize that time and be intentional? So I'll look out at the beginning of a quarter and be like, okay, this is the week I'm going to be in the office. This is how we're going to structure, you know, creative planning sessions. This is how I'll work with my peers to do certain whatever we need to do. Is it a week I'm going to be in the office? Or for the people that are in the office that work hybrid, you know, our sales team, for example, will do, you know, call sprint days when people are in the office. So I think it's just, you have to be intentional with your time in order to get more out of it when you are managing, you know, hybrid and remote teams.
Yeah, agreed. I do think it has become easier over time, and as we sort of get into rhythms, but it all just depends on what's happening in any given quarter, any given month. What are the projects? What are the focus areas? But I think it pays off to be, as Taylor said, a little bit more intentional and do that planning, because again, you don't want to be wasting people's time. You don't want them to commute to the office if we're going to just sit hunched over our desk all day and not talk. So it is, you know, I think our team has a really good relationship, and so we are happy to sort of have that banter and have these discussions. And I think you also know that, you know, when we first came back to the office, I think people felt like they weren't as productive because they were talking so much. So there's a balance there, but I think, again, it goes back to that social connection. It goes back to that building of trust, that feeling of camaraderie. So I think it's also important to in this hybrid environment, to be thoughtful and just, be respectful of other people's time. And so planning and thinking things through and thinking in advance really, helps everybody out and just makes for a better experience for everyone on the team.
And it's interesting. This is where I was actually going to go with the next question, and it's come in as a question, so I will sort of try and integrate the two. Is, face to face, we had developed techniques and tips to bring out our quieter team members, to try and encourage them. The research is mixed of whether it's easier or harder online. But what do you two do if you've got somebody who either is not contributing during the virtual meetings or the other things that you're talking about? You've got the water cooler chats, you've got the different ways of sharing, putting up recipes, putting up dog pictures, and then you've got the person who doesn't do it. What do you do then? How do you encourage them?
I mean, some people are naturally, you can't fit a square peg in a round hole, right? There are natural people that are going to be introverts. At the end of the day, is that person delivering on their, KPIs or MBOs to the business? Is that person doing their job responsibilities? At the end of the day, that, that always comes first, right? Is the person you hired for the job doing their job, number one. And if they are doing that, but they're, maybe don't want to communicate, or they, maybe are having a conflict, I think that's where, the manager or leader steps in and makes sure that you do a double check into, hey, like, how are things going? Like, are you feeling connected to the business? Are you doing these things? Hey, like, we're having, like, would trivia be better? Because then you don't have to necessarily talk. You can just click a button, right? Or just showing up for those things. So I think it is on a case-by-case basis. But again, I think different people and different personalities truly make a team. You're always going to have people that have different personalities, and a good manager is going to recognize how you bring out the best in each individual person, depending on that skill set. So sometimes you just, I don't know, I have someone who just, it's hard to get her to come to Dallas. It's like pulling teeth, and it's just sometimes, but in a one-on-one setting, I can get more out of that person, but they're a workhorse when it comes to doing their job. So again, it just, I don't know, you pick your battles just like you do in parenting, right? On what you want from people. Heather?
Yeah. I mean, I think, you certainly don't want to force anyone to be participating in some of the online, chats or competitions. Like the competition I mentioned, the environmental challenge, that's all voluntary. You don't have to participate. But if you want to, that's great. And it's a good opportunity to get to meet other colleagues. I think when it comes to like meetings and having people participate, I think I may have mentioned this already, but kind of throwing somebody a softball or setting them up. If you've had a conversation offline where they have an idea, they have a perspective on a particular topic or project, but they're not bringing it out, I might say, Taylor, you were telling me about this. I think it would be great to share with the rest of the team. And, not to put anyone on that spot, but to try to make them more comfortable and feel like their ideas will be welcomed. And again, like giving credit for somebody's idea. If I know that they don't want to participate on a wider team chat, I might say, you know what, Taylor brought this up when I was talking to her, and I think it's fantastic, and we should consider this and go from there. So I think it's just trying to give, a gentle nudge to people to make it a welcoming space. But, everyone has a different personality, and even in the office, people are reluctant sometimes to participate in meetings. So I think it's taking, tricks from both sides and applying them in those types of situations. And the same for social aspects. I mean, some people in the office might not want to go to that after work social, and that's okay. But, how do you find a different way to connect with them? Maybe it is over a coffee. Maybe it is stopping by their desk. Maybe it's just sending them a personal message on Teams. So, I think there's no pressure to do anything. And again, as Taylor said, the important thing is the person performing in their job that we've hired them to do, and how is that, as long as there's no conflict, I think we're in a good place.
Well, and it's interesting. So a question sort of coming in on a couple of questions have come in on this as well, that, you know, we keep reading that, you know, CEOs are mandating everybody has to come back to the office. You know, what should the argument be from where you two sit of how we convince leadership that we don't all need to be back in the office?
No, sell your office
think-
space. You don't have to justify your OpEx. Sorry,
Yeah,
blunt.
yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's
I
part
mean,
of
I
it.
think, yeah, no, I mean, I think, you know, we're, you know, insight into, you know, larger budgets. So I think there's a massive part of it that is justifying that OpEx when it comes to what they're spending on commercial real estate, which is, especially in large cities, it's very expensive. So I think that that is a big piece of it. You know, my response to that is, you know, again, I find in, you know, the teams that I've coached, happier employees that are balanced are more effective and productive employees. So are you getting the most out of your employees, and does spending, you know, 2 to 3 hours on a commute make them more productive or not, right? Like, again, I think it's, if you, I think, again, you have to be intentional with how you manage teams when you are a remote leader. You have to be, you know, you have to earn people's trust in order to do that. So I think maybe it's like an old style that's like more of like beating with a stick type leadership that's going to struggle with people who don't want to come back into the office. I think you need to give people that trust, and people are going to surprise you with their performance back to it. Because again, I think we're all adults. If we all, you know, again, first trust people to do their jobs and give them the supportive tools in order to do it, I think people can be effective no matter where they are. And sure, like, provide opportunities to bring people together in offsites, provide people opportunities to travel. I think that is a huge piece of it. But I mean, that would be my argument. I don't know, Heather, what do you got? Like,
Yeah. No,
I totally revolt against people demanding back into the office. I would never accept a job that was like that.
yeah. No, I think, I mean, having gone this way, I think it's really hard to walk that back and take away that benefit. I think there's a lot of autonomy to working remotely, and you can manage your schedule. And yeah, there's certainly common hours where people are expected to be available. But I mean, if you have to step out for an appointment, or, you know, to go pick up a family member, or to go for a run, or do whatever, you can do that and still get your job done. I mean, you don't have to be in the construct of that 8 to 5, you know, work day. And so I think that is important. And I think, you know, I think employees who, you know, for employees who were in an office before COVID, if they were effective in the office, there's no reason to think they can't be effective at home. And I think we've seen that borne out in some of the research that's come out, you know, looking at the hybrid work arrangements, you know, coming out of the pandemic. I don't think the research, and Lucy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it's saying that people are less productive, you know, in that remote environment. I think it's, again, is there effective leadership in place to sort of oversee that type of work arrangement, and getting the best out of their team members? And so I think that's really the focus. It's not really about, you know, where you're sitting on any given day. It's how are you working with your team? Are you getting your job done? But I think there's a whole element of that work-life balance. And, you know, I think employers who are mandating full-time in person, they could, you know, struggle with attrition or retention issues, because I think the expectation now is that there is that, it is flexibility, you know, built into the system. And now that we've become accustomed to that, I don't think most people are going to want to give that up.
And I will say, people, you're sending in your questions, so please continue to do so, and I will link some of them because it's really interesting. Some of them are coming in on similar topics. But, you know, one of the things that we so let me answer your question first, Heather. Actually, you're completely correct, right? The research is showing that people can be just as effective virtual, hybrid, or in the office. But what it also shows very clearly is what has to dictate a lot of that is the task or the industry, right? So, you know, I'm happy with a lot of my team working hybrid, but we have all our undergraduates in the building. And so we also have to be here because a lot of we are a residential campus. And so we work with students who are here. And so we have to be here as well, because it would be incredibly depressing for them to walk down hallways of dark offices, go to their classroom. You know, it doesn't work. So, it has to be task setting. But that also relates to the second piece of this is, we're reading a lot more about this with the effects on mental health and, well-being, stress, people feeling isolated, loneliness. Are you seeing that with people that you're working with, that they're feeling that, there are issues with people feeling very lonely, and really mental health issues?
So I'll take that. I have someone on my team who's a younger person, Gen Z, and this is a compliment to him. He's like a golden retriever. He just loves people and loves to be around, but he is someone who he's based in Houston, where our office is in Dallas. So, and this person gets energy from being around other people. This person is very much stimulated by it. So he is someone that again, like, it's on the leader to make room and make space for your people in their needs and to support them in that. So this person is, it's cost effective. You can drive from Houston to Dallas. So he's in the office more often than other team members because that is a core piece of what fills his tank. So again, I think it comes down to the leader where you can budget for additional, T&E in a given month to get an employee there, or like, that's just someone who needs that. But then I have other people that are like, I don't want to travel. I am happy being at home. I am happy, driving my daughter to, to practice, and they need that because that makes them happy. So everybody is a little bit different. So I think it just comes down to understanding what the needs are of your employees and then putting in things to support them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that flexibility piece because everyone has different personalities. I think for myself, towards the end of COVID, I was definitely feeling that isolation and loneliness. So I was, was looking forward to coming back to the office. And I think now that, again, the hybrid, I think works out well. It's a really nice balance for me personally, but there are some people that come in 5 days a week because they kind of thrive on being around others. And so some days they're probably more happy than others because there are more people in the middle of the week than there are on a Monday or a Friday, but that works for them. And then there's other people on our team who, similar to Taylor, they maybe don't come in all 3 days every single week, and that's okay because they're still participating in the team. They're still being productive and getting their work done and participating. So I think it's meeting people where they are and putting in place, the resources and the mechanisms to support them in bringing their best selves to work and working in an environment that works best for them.
And I think we have to be really cognizant of things like, and the value of having camera on for meetings is important when, you want to see people's reactions and interact. But we also know that camera on is much more exhausting, right? Because the mind can't separate looking at yourself versus looking at other people. So you actually tax more of your brain when your camera's on, because even though you're trying desperately, and I've posted over myself now, every now and then I'm like, what's happening, right? And so it is exhausting. And so from mental health issues, I think we have to be cognizant of that and say, listen, really want to talk to you now. You can keep your camera off. That's fine. The other thing that I think is interesting, and there's a question about this, is that we actually found that there were, we all hate commuting. No one says, I love my commute. Maybe you listen to a book on tape and you enjoy that, but no one goes, the favorite part of my day is the commute. But one of the things that, we found with COVID was that people really struggled with is, commuting is a separation between work and home, right? And it forced that break, and so I think the people who are working from home, and I'm curious, for your thoughts on this, have to set up those delineations, and you'll do it in different ways. It could be your run. It could be once I pick a kid up from school, but if not, one of the difficulties in mental health, again, exhaustion, is when you work remotely, are you working all the time?
Yeah.
So.
I'll take that because this is something that I struggled with earlier on in my career, to the point of severe burnout. And I got pushed to the point where, as someone who is typically a people pleaser, I was always a yes girl. Like, I never wanted to turn down anything, but it was only when I started saying no that I was able to get what I needed, which was help at the time and just people. I needed support on a team. So once I started saying no and condensing my hours into, I'm available from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern. That's it. That way, like, my work hours are very productive between those times, and I don't touch it outside of that. I also, I drop off my daughter in the morning and I pick her up at night, after I work out. So making sure that that is the time that I have to work. And I'm lucky to have an office that I can step into, and I close those doors when I walk out and I don't go back in. Like,
Yeah.
that's where I go to work, even though it's 20 feet from where, I rest my head. That's my office and that's where I go to work, and really trying to separate that. But again, that's a privilege that I have in office. There's a lot of people, when you switch to remote work, that were working from their kitchen table or their couch because they didn't have that space. So I do recognize that, but that has been like a lifesaver for me. I'd probably feel differently if I was working from the kitchen table.
But I think,
Yeah.
but even if it's dropping off your kid, I think it's establishing those routines, those boundaries. And I'm suddenly looking at the time, and I want to ask both of you from an input on a question that I find here is fascinating. And I'm going to read it directly. Do you think being effective remotely is because the employee has learned how to be effective in the office? If we'd never worked in the office first, would we still be effective working remotely?
I think that's a really good question. I think, as someone who did work in the office, before, I think it helped me make the transition to remote work, only because I already had connections with a lot of my colleagues, not the ones that were, on a different time zone or continent per se, but in my own office, like I knew who I was working with. I can see it being more challenging to enter an organization as a remote only employee and not knowing anyone. And so that's where I think building those social outlets and connections are really important to try to sort of foster that. But I do certainly think, outside of that social aspect, you can definitely be effective as a remote worker, having not worked in an office. I mean, I'm thinking about all of the UNH students who had to go through their first few years of college, remote, and so I'm sure that people have the skills to make remote work for them. I think it's just figuring out, what do you need to be successful in a home office environment, and asking your employer for help if you need additional resources or what will work best for you. So I think it is possible, but it can also go the other way too. I mean, people who are perhaps more introverted might do better at home because they're not constantly faced with the barrage of people at the office. So I think it's again, kind of all an individualized circumstance.
Yeah. I mean, I've started multiple jobs in a remote setting, so entering new companies as a remote employee. So again, I think it's a little bit what you said, Heather. You have to put yourself out there and not be afraid to just reach out and cold call people or set up time with people in order to foster earn that trust, get the FaceTime, just like you would stopping by a desk. From an employee standpoint, and I had someone, it's my golden retriever, that he was new to the workforce, hired him remotely, and like first job in marketing, in a marketing role for a software company was remote. And I think it comes down to transparency and goal setting and being frequency of meetings to say, hey, like, you're new here. This is how, this is a, suggested way to structure your day. Here are the weekly things you need to do. Here are the monthly things you need to do. And especially for junior employees, just like you would in an office, but spelling it out for them so that they have a framework to follow, you're going to get more success out of them if they are new to the workforce in a remote setting. I think it's just being really clear and transparent with them on what is expected. Just because you're working from home doesn't mean you're, in your Snuggie playing Call of Duty or whatever it is. Like, you're meant to work and do things. So
I'm going to end us on that note.
What a way to end.
Yeah, I love it. Perfect.
Because there's many more questions coming in. I realize we're up against time. So I really, first of all, thank you, Taylor. Thank you, Heather. That was great fun. And I think you delivered on strategies for success and priorities. So thank you. Thank you to all our audience who joined. If I have to sort of summarize, I don't know, the notes that I wrote down were really communicate. That I think in a virtual hybrid world, you have to over communicate, and using multiple channels after the meeting. You've done your virtual meeting, then get on the phone, and don't worry about interrupting people. They are working. You're at work, like treat it as at work. And then I think the other thing that if I'm going to summarize some of the key points, right, well, meeting times, these other channels, it's about work, but it's also about the people side. We need to know that humans need to know the people they're working with. And so, what does that look like? It looks different for everybody. So some people will share a lot, some people won't, but, still getting to know our team members as people is an important thing. So on that note, thank you to everybody who joined us today. Please look out for future UNH alumni, both webinars online and social. We do events in person as well, so please join us online and in person. And for those of you who support us, thank you. None of this would be possible without the philanthropy of our alumni and business partners. And I will just put in a plug as the chimes go off. Our 603 challenge is coming up in April. So thank you all very much, and we look forward to seeing you soon.